caught in the crossfire. It's caught in the
Hello, today we are going to be reading this book called Back to the Future. Marty McFly has time traveled to 1955. Can he find his way back to the future? Back to the Future. So based on the movie written by Robert and Bob Gale and illustrated by Kim Smith. This is Marty McFly. It is 1985 and Marty lives in a town called Hill Valley. Hill Valley is a friendly town with a courthouse that's famous because of its broken clock. The clock stopped 30 years ago after it was struck by lightning today. The people of Hill Valley want to make sure the clock is preserved. Save the clock tower! Hill Valley Telegraph. Clock tower struck by lightning on November 12, 1955. Clock stopped at 10:04 p.m. The Hill Valley Preservation Society. Marty's best friend is a scientist named Dr. Emmett Brown. Marty calls him Doc for short. Doc is always making cool inventions like an atomic dog feeder and a giant guitar amplifier. But Marty's life at home is not so cool. Marty's parents, George and Lorraine, don't seem to love each other. His brother Dave and his sister Linda are always arguing. And George has a mean boss called Biff Tannen. He's a bully. He always pushes George around and makes him do work. Marty wishes his father would stand up to Biff, but George doesn't have the courage. One night, Doc reveals his newest invention to Marty. He's built a time machine. The way I see it, Doc explains, if you're going to build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style? Doc uses a special fuel called plutonium. Plutonium generates 1.21 gigawatts of electricity. Electricity powers the flux capacitor. Speed, 88 miles per hour. Flux capacitor equals time travel. When Marty test drove the machine, he accidentally time traveled to 1955, 30 years earlier. It was long before the mall was built and before the time machine had even been invented. Oh no. Marty knew that he had to get home, so he hid the time machine and went to search for young Doc Brown. Hopefully, the time machine's inventor could help him get back to the future. Marty discovered that Hill Valley looked very different in 1955. True. The cars looked different. The clothes looked different. But the clock was working fine because it was still 1 week before the lightning bolt would strike. So, before Marty could find young Doc Brown, he found his parents at a soda shop in 1955. George and Lorraine were teenagers just like Marty. And bully Biff was still pushing poor George around and making him do his homework. Marty defended George and accidentally inferred with his parents' romance. Now Lorraine liked Marty because he stood up to Biff. This was a problem. If George and Lorraine didn't fall in love and marry, how could they have kids? Marty looked at a photo of himself and his brother and sister. Dave and Linda were starting to disappear as they've never been born. Marty located the house of young Doc Brown. He introduced himself. My name is Marty and I came from the future. I came in a time machine that you invented and I now need 1.21 gigawatts of electricity to get back. In the year 1985. Doc did not believe him. So Marty took Doc to the time machine, but Doc had bad news. There's no plutonium in 1955. Only a bolt of lightning can generate that kind of power. Unfortunately, we never know when or where lightning will strike. Doc quickly put together a plan. If we can harness the electricity from the lightning, we can send you back to the future. So a wire is stretched from the clock tower down to the street. Lightning strikes clock tower at exactly 10:04 p.m. 1.21 gigawatts of electricity travels down the wire. Car travels 88 miles per hour. Hook touches wire and sends electricity to the flux capacitor. But Marty, Doc said, before you leave 1955, you have to make sure your parents fall in love. Otherwise, you, your brother, and your sister would never be born. Marty spent the next few days trying to make his parents fall in love. Marty begged George to invite Lorraine to the school dance, though George liked Lorraine, but he was too shy to ask her. Marty checked the photo and saw that he was starting to fade away too. He had to do something. Marty remembered that his father liked science fiction, so that night Marty sneaked into George's room dressed like an alien. I'm Darth Vader from planet Vulcan, Marty said. If you do not invite Lorraine to the school dance, I will melt your brain. The trick worked. George found the courage to speak to Lorraine. But Marty knew he'd have to also teach George to find the courage to stand up for himself. So yeah, he did. Things worked out perfectly. George liked Lorraine so much he stood up for her to protect her from Biff. And that night, George and Lorraine danced, kissed, and fell in love. Marty's plan worked. And he got to have some fun as well. And well, just in time too, because that very night, the lightning was going to strike the clock tower. Doc put his plan in motion. He attacked the giant wire to the clock. While Marty was down the street speeding up to 88 miles per hour. But then a tree fell on the wire, snapping it. Great Scott! Doc raced down to fix the cable before the clock hit 10:04. Doc connected the cables just as Marty drove under them and lightning struck the clock tower. The electricity powered the flux capacitor and the time machine returned to 1985. Marty was safe and sound in his own time. Now, because George had learnt to stand up for himself, things at home are very different. George and Lorraine loved each other. His brother Dave and Linda didn't argue anymore. They actually was able to talk to each other. I'm almost finished waxing your car, Mr. McFly. Biff never bullied George again. In fact, Biff now works for George. George even published a science fiction novel. It was based on a dream when he was a teenager. At least George thought it was a dream. Oh no. Well, at least he made a book. Yeah. And from that day on, Marty and Doc had many more exciting adventures in the past, present, and the future. The end.